Welcome to the Talent Development Hot Seat, a show where I interview business executives, talent development professionals, and thought leaders to find out what has been successful and challenging in the world of talent development. My objective is to share ideas, valuable lessons, tools, advice, and trends. My hope is that all of this will ultimately help you, the listener, expand your knowledge, grow your career, and accelerate your success as a talent development professional. Welcome back to another episode of the Talent Development Hot Seat. I am your host, Andy Storch, and I am so excited and grateful that you are joining me today for an interview with Kevin Kruse. And Kevin is a New York Times bestselling author and the founder and CEO of LEADx, which provides the world's first executive coach and trainer powered by IBM Watson AI. He is the author of multiple books, including 15 Secrets Successful People Know About Time Management, Employee Engagement 2.0, and his newest book is called Great Leaders Have No Rules. I have been following Kevin for some time, and I've read two of his books, and I'm excited to get my hands on this new one and to talk to him today. So Kevin, welcome to the Talent Development Hot Seat.
Yeah, great to be talking with you again. It's awesome to be here.
It is really cool to have you on. I mean, just to think about this journey, I first maybe heard you on another podcast probably 3 years ago and got your book about time management, which absolutely changed the way I work. And, people ask me, how do you do all the things you do? I host 2 podcasts, run a business, have a family, do all this stuff on social media. And I can say a lot of it is attributed back to me reading your books and seeing all the stuff that you've done, or at least that you taught, and putting those things into place. So thank you for that.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Glad that you got some value out of that. And as we were saying, you've excelled in areas that I haven't, like hitting the gym at 6:30 in the morning consistently.
It's all about setting priorities and figuring out where you want to spend your time. And where I want to spend our time today is talking about LEADx, the organization you're running, as well as the new book you have coming out. So why don't we start with LEADx, because you started that after we talked last time, which was a couple of years ago. And I'd love to hear about what's going on with that organization and what you do there.
Yeah, right. And, LEADx, I was working, I guess it was about 2 years ago we founded, but we were in stealth mode for 2 years. We only publicly became available in November of last year. And, it came from, as you know, it's been like 30 years of doing e-learning, EHR companies, HR tech companies. And I had taken a bunch of years off, was doing more of the writing and speaking stuff. But I saw how artificial intelligence was being used to create these like virtual therapists for mental health, cognitive behavioral therapy. And, being a guy who's always been passionate about leadership, I said, you know what? Leadership is about behaviors. Leadership is about a mindset. Like if there are now studies, which there are, that are showing like these robot coaches were having equivalency to human therapists for mental health, I'm like, I wonder if a robot executive coach could get similar results as a human executive coach. And so we've been, working for over 2 years now with IBM Watson to create, we call her Coach Amanda. And it's basically the world's first executive coach built on IBM Watson. And, we don't today pretend to say that Coach Amanda is as good as a human executive coach. We're nowhere close to that yet. I don't think we're that many years away from it. But when you think about what the average coach, a good one anyway, costs per hour, and that you're usually meeting with them once a week, once every other week, you can now use AI to scale coaching because it's about 1/1000th the price of a human executive coach. And in the same way, I mean, basically, Coach Amanda will not be that kind of executive coach where you just like give it a problem or a work situation and role play it out. It's not like that, but she'll diagnose your personality on the Big 5 scale, give you advice about how your personality impacts your ability to delegate, to coach, to hold one-on-one meetings. You can set a goal, a developmental goal, like I want to get better at recognition and appreciation, or at accountability, or whatever leadership competency. There's a whole bunch in there. You'll set a goal, a time frame. You can create your own action plan, or Coach Amanda will offer 12 things to do over 12 weeks, which to a lot of coaches, that's not what coaches do, but she does suggest it. And then she'll check in with you once a week. Coach Amanda will buzz your phone and say, hey, Andy, your goal is to become a better, public speaker in 12 weeks. Your next action item is to watch some TED Talks. Did you do it or not? And if you did, she'll ask you to jot a couple notes about like your takeaways. If you didn't, she's going to say, write a couple sentences on like what got in the way of you accomplishing that item this week.
Yeah.
That goes in your coaching journal. And so it's way limited compared to a human, but for the blocking and tackling and fundamentals of setting a developmental goal as a manager, as a leader, getting an action plan, having an accountability partner, she works pretty well.
Man, that's incredible. I mean, you hear a lot about AI and how so many things are getting automated, like cars and everything else, and customer service with bots and whatnot. It makes sense that this might come. We have a lot of listeners who work in talent development who are probably certified coaches as well.
Yes.
Should we all be worried about our jobs? Where do you see this going, and what's the difference between? You talked a little bit about the difference between this and where a human can add value to a situation.
Well, so I think first of all, we're 5 years away before AI starts replacing human executive coaches. I do think it's going to happen. And when I say it's not that within 5 years you're going to pass the test of like, oh, I'm talking to this AI and I can't tell the difference whether it's a human or not. It's not going to be like that.
The Turing test. Right?
What's that?
The Turing test, right?
Yeah, it won't pass a Turing test in 5 years. But if you did an A/B split group, two cohorts, randomized the groups and said, all right, these are all motivated people who want to get better at some, leadership competency, and half are getting human executive coaches, half are getting the robot coach. And then at the end, we're going to measure behavior change, how much did you like the experience? How much you'd recommend the experience? NPS score it. The robot coach will be equivalent or better than the human, I think, from those metrics. It's not that it will confuse you, that it's like chatting with a human. I think the outcomes will be equivalent. My message to coaches, though, Andy, is like anything, like we're all getting displaced or at risk of getting displaced.
Yeah.
So you need to, first of all, there's only one of you, whoever you are. So you need to, have a brand, have a process. Like that's one of the easiest things you can kind of trademark, even if you're not officially trademarking, is like your approach, your own approach, your own background and stories. But I think you need to go up the food chain. So right now there is, a lot of companies out there talking about AI-powered scaled coaching. And what it is, it's these coaching platforms. So it's like, I want to coach now. I hit a button and it matches me to Andy, who's available now and fits my criteria. It's still a human thing. Well, that's not really scalable. It's taking the friction out of it. And usually, and I mean no disrespect to any of the coaches that are in this, but like Marshall Goldsmith isn't sitting around waiting for someone to hit a button on their phone to talk to Marshall Goldsmith, right?
He's not? Okay.
So you've got to move up that food chain and provide more and more advanced services, niche markets, and then that bottom. So like we do have a CEO that's using Coach Amanda, but we're about democratizing and scaling that leadership coaching experience. We're like for frontline managers who are like, I'm a brand new coach, and I know I'm being told giving feedback is critical to success as a manager. Give me a 12-week plan of things to learn, things to reflect on, practice exercises, things to apply to help me to get better at giving effective feedback. So, that's the lower end. I hate to use those words. That's kind of the lower end, basic kind of coaching. And that's what the robots will displace first. I mean, that's what we're doing now.
Oh yeah, I could see that. And I like your advice of developing a personal brand, a story, what sets you apart, go higher up the food chain, and really build personal relationships, because that's where you're still going to do a lot of your work, is with people who value you and you as a person and don't just want the commodity of coaching. And so, as AI takes over more of the world, people talk all about, you have kids I know that are older than mine. I have young kids. People talk all about STEM and, the sciences and everything. I say forget that. Everything the robots are going to program themselves in the near future. I want to teach my kids to develop personal relationships, because at the end of the day, I think that's going to be the most important thing.
No, I'm with you on that. And in fact, you're right. So my two oldest are in college. My son's in high school, and they all did great in science. And I kind of tried to nudge my girls, like, hey, women in STEM, a great opportunity right now. You should take advantage of this. They had no interest. They wanted to do dance, theater, writing, film, all that, the more like artsy stuff. And, but I'm saying to them now, I'm like, you know what? Like, I know they're going to be just fine because they've got high EQ and they're, they communicate well. They're very conscientious. They seem to be very high in what, like, most people say the younger generation is low in, which could just be us saying, like, get off our lawn, right. But yeah, I think it's the soft skills. I think it's leadership skills. I think it's communication skills that will guarantee that you'll have a job and be valued in the work world as the robots emerge.
Right. Now, speaking of communication skills, going back to this AI powered coach, it has to get its communication from somewhere. So what is the research? What's the data that's going into this to help it sound at least like, somewhat like a real coach?
Yeah. So there's different pieces. So for example, the personality assessment is the IBM Watson has a Big 5 assessment module. So that's coming from IBM Watson. They've got their research and validation online and all that. Our answers in our competency model. So we have a built-in competency model, but we will adapt to a client's competency model as well. But ours is reviewed. So we have two IO psychologists who both have that academic background, but they've been executive coaches. Roger Lipson, Paul Marciano on personality stuff we've worked with. So they're coming in with both like that human psychology background with the real world executive coaching experience as well. But then, we've got dozens of people, like we have over 1,000 learning assets in the platform. So we've got a whole content area around Clifton strengths, as an example, to reinforce Clifton strengths, to remind you of your Clifton strengths. That was all written by a certified Gallup Clifton strengths coach. We have 1,000 little mini video lessons, and there's dozens of authors and gurus and consultants who have contributed to that library. So there's, each one has different level of expertise. But the Coach Amanda stuff is pretty much being written, by an instructional designer and or certified executive coach. It gets, reviewed by me and Roger Lipson. Yeah, and then gets, or he and I will review it together if it's like the architecture of the leadership competency model, et cetera. So that's what's driving it in the background.
Really cool. All right. Well, I am very curious to see where all of that goes. I know.
Yeah, it's fun.
I know you've done a ton of work as you were building it to get the right data and information in there to connect with the right people. I know you've interviewed hundreds of people through your own podcasts and books and research, which is why I enjoy following you. And speaking of research, I want to shift gears and talk a little bit about employee engagement, because I know you've done a lot of work and research there as well. And that's something that our listeners care a lot about. How do we drive better employee engagement in our organizations? And I think you have a book on this. You've talked about this in the past. I know you have a keynote on the 3 key drivers to employee engagement. So I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about how can we be more successful in driving employee engagement?
Yeah. And that was, it's funny, what kicked that off was, it was a decade ago now. I did a book with a former partner, Rudy Carson, when we were at Connexa. And so it's based on the Connexa research of 10 million workers around the world. And Connexa has since then been bought by IBM. So this is now the IBM engagement model. Like when the researchers came back, like all the others, they said, hey, good news, we got 12 drivers of engagement, and it includes this, that, and the other. And I said, okay, that's horrible, because like we're not writing a book for HR professionals. It's not a PSYOP book, an IO psych book. We want to write a book for busy managers. So when they crunched the data again, they came back and, they confirmed what Gallup often says. In fact, Gallup has a new book coming out called It's the Manager. 70% of the variance in employee engagement is tied to who your boss is. So, in a big company, it's the same CEO, it's the same mission, vision, values, same comp system, same orientation. And yet you'll have one division with high engagement, another with low engagement. Well, what's the difference? It's the boss, right? We join a company, we leave a boss. And so that's the first big thing we all need to realize is the manager, it's not all on the manager, but it's mainly on the manager. And so then it's like, okay, well, what does the manager have to do to what are the buttons to push? And the big ones, like over 70% of the model we saw in 10 million surveys, is it has to do with growth, recognition, and trust. We all want to grow and learn and be challenged and advance in our career. Recognition, we want to feel appreciated by our boss and our peers. And then trust, I mean, the low bar is like ethics, integrity, but it's really about, I trust that leadership has a plan for the future. I trust the organization will be successful in the future. And that's the one that does kind of leapfrog your manager. And it's a little bit like, do people know what the company's, annual plan is, annual goal is? Does it know what the 5-year mission is? I always talk about Coca-Cola, and I'm sure they probably have a new one by now, but for the longest time now, and Coca-Cola is obviously a massive company. They don't just sell Coke, right? It's like 1,000 products worldwide. The average Coca-Cola employee is not going to be able to tell you the 1,000-page strategic plan. But if you say Coca-Cola 2020 vision, anyone's going to be able to tell you, oh, I know what that is. We're going to double our revenue 2020 by the year 2020. So they've like boiled down their plan into a phrase that for 8 years now, everybody, in every meeting and the signs, everybody's talking about, we're going to double. So even if you don't know anything, it's like, I'm in a company that's growing. We're doubling our revenue. And we're thinking about next year or 5 years ahead or whatever that is. It's not just the pain and the problem of today. It's not like because any growing company is going to have problems, right? Mm-hmm. So it's not just like, this is broken, that's broken, and oh my gosh, nobody knows what they're doing. It's like, hey, we're growing and things are breaking, but we're going to fix them. And next year's going to be better than this year. And the year after that's going to be better,
and people want to work for a winner. They want to know they're part of something bigger than them, that things are going well and their job is going to be secure and that they're going to have new opportunities and opportunities for development.
That's exactly right. Like I didn't even think about putting that emphasis, like whether it's a conscious thought or not. Like if you think your company is shrinking in the future, what kind of job opportunities is that for you? If you know your company's going to double in size in X years, you're like, oh, well, I bet there's going to be some upward mobility. There's going to be some opportunity, some chance to do some new things. So that's the message. Like, I don't pretend to be, like the guru of engagement, but the reason why I've gotten so much traction with the books, with that speech, is because I think it's a simplified model. It's like, yeah, there are 8, 10, 12, 20 things that drive engagement, but you'll get most of the job done as a manager if you help people to grow, show a lot of appreciation, recognition, and help them to see how their work and their career is aligning and supporting and growing with the future of the organization.
Yeah, and a lot of that aligns with the work I've been doing in building simulations and running other experiential learning programs where you want to get people aligned to a strategy, help them understand it and how their role plays a part in it, speaking to that trust part. And you want to challenge them and give them those growth opportunities because most fulfillment comes from growth and that comes from, taking these new challenges. So I think growth and challenges, people probably understand pretty well. The trust is all about aligning to the strategy, the values, and working for a winning company. What about recognition? How do we get better there? What are some keys to making sure that you're doing that right to drive engagement?
Well, the wrong way to do it is to think like that. Again, it's an organizational problem. Oh, let's have another employee of the month program. And the problem with that, of course, is the winner's circle is so small that if you win it, if you're the one person who's the employee of the month or in the president's club or whatever it is, okay, that feels pretty good, but it doesn't touch all the others. And at worst, you might have disengaged some other top performers who think they should have been named. But the winner circle is too large with the summer picnics and the holiday parties. You might want to do that for fun or to build some socializing, but it doesn't really trigger engagement. Recognition is more about the day-to-day, the thank yous, the verbal thank yous, done in the right way. The handwritten thank you notes, the emails thanking Andy and CCing my boss so that Andy's getting visibility, higher in the organization. And the good news with all of that is it takes very little time or money. What people want to know is like that they're doing a good job and it's appreciated, but it's not the complicated, hey, you've been here 5 years, pick a prize from page 5, of the catalog. It's about really showing up at work and working with people who appreciate what you're doing.
Yeah. Hey, by the way, I just used a gift certificate that I got for being with the company for 5 years that I got nearly 5 years ago. But it was an awesome gift. And I used it to take my wife skydiving for our anniversary recently.
Oh, nice. I've always wanted to go skydiving. And I always sort of felt like I needed to wait till my kids were older because I was a little nervous about the worst case scenario.
Yeah.
Did you have fun with it?
Oh my gosh. It was the most exhilarating experience of my life. It was amazing. We went for our 15th anniversary, and maybe it wasn't wise from a safety standpoint with young kids. But, but now you've got two, so you have to be 18. And my daughter, who's 5, has already asked me when she can go, and she's got a while to wait. But you have 2 over 18. You could take them with you.
The middle one has been saying she wants to go. My son is almost 16, and I'm like, yeah, wait 2 more years till he's 18. Maybe then it'll become a whole family thing.
That would be really cool. And you're also never too old because George H.W. Bush went on his 90th birthday, right?
Wasn't that cool? I used to love seeing that when he would go up every year.
Yeah, it was awesome. So that's definitely something I want to do every year. It was awesome. But getting back to our interview and you, I want to get into your new book, which is called Great Leaders Have No Rules. So tell me, where did this come from? Was the impetus from the book, and what are we going to find in there?
Yeah, this has been on my mind. This book has been on my mind for about 20 years. And the title, Great Leaders Have No Rules, it's one of the chapter titles. And the origin is that when I was 30, I sold my company, part of the deal was I joined this bigger company as a vice president, as a partner, report to the CEO. And he gave me that big speech of like, I'm not your boss. We're partners. We're going to build this company together. Rah, rah, rah. And all right, I'm all in. This is going to be awesome. And then Andy, it was like 30 days in, I get my first expense check, at the office, and I open it up and I notice it's like short by $4. Not a lot of money, but I thought like, well, maybe I filled out the form wrong, or I don't know something, So I emailed the CFO, hey, Don, it's short $4. And he's like, yes, we deducted the Post-it notes that you submitted. So I said, why? He says, wasteful expense. We don't allow Post-it notes. So in that moment, I didn't know about this rule that you're not allowed to expense Post-it notes.
Yeah.
In that moment, how much did I feel like a vice president, like a partner, like I was equal to the CEO growing this company together in one simple little $4 rule?
Yeah.
I was told, you have no control, power, ownership. So every time we bump into a rule, it takes away the opportunity to make a choice, to make a decision. And it suddenly becomes your company, not my company. And the funny thing is, so now look, the haters out there, I'll concede, look, we need rules if there's laws. We need rules if it's like someone's going to die, servicing an elevator. Or wear a hard hat, on the good. Those are good rules. And if you are really bad at hiring, if you have horrible employees you cannot hire, okay, maybe you need some rules that might help a little. But otherwise, rules take away conversation. Rules take away commitment. Now, with that Post-it note story, I went to the CEO and I'm like, Rudy, dude, what is this? That I'm not allowed to buy Post-it notes. And to his credit, he said, Kevin, I had no idea that this was bumming people out. Another one of their rules was no alcohol. So they wouldn't reimburse for alcohol. So my buddy who came into the company the same way, he's 30 years old, he was traveling on business, ate dinner at a restaurant and had submitted his bill, and they deducted the $3 for his beer. He could have had a $5 milkshake, but not a $3 beer. And so Rudy said, I didn't know that this was like bothering people. Fine. The rule's overturned. Everybody can buy Post-it notes. But he says, Kevin, I don't care about Post-it notes. He said, one of our values is growth and profit. And it was a written value. And it sounds kind of funny that you'd have a written value of profit, but they did. And he said, I used to go around, walk around, and everybody had the Post-it notes, and they'd be doodling on them. They'd be taking phone messages on them. And he says, you know what I do to doodle or take phone messages? And he pulled up a stack of scrap paper from the printer that he had torn into 4 pieces. He says, that doesn't cost any money at all. So he said, the no Post-it note rule was a symbol of frugality. It was to remind people of this value of profit. Now, he overturned that rule. Now, I stayed at that company for 5 years, longer than my earnout. You know, I was very engaged for the 5 years, but I never bought Post-it notes and submitted them, because once we had a conversation, it was a conversation about values. Once it was a conversation about what's normal, I'm like, oh, okay, I get it now. And I want to be a partner on this team. I want to be a good team member. I want to send that signal. But it's entirely different. And so the crazy thing, you know, is like, I go to an extreme on this. I feel that like in really unhealthy organizations, managers become just enforcers of rules. So rather than doing the hard work of leading, of making sure all the new employees understand the values and are living the values, are reminded of the values, of making sure people know what the guardrails are. And if you get a knucklehead who like ordered 6 beers at dinner and tried to expense them all, okay, that's called a coachable moment. That's a time for effective feedback, right? And if the knucklehead does it again, fine, you fire them. But like, to have a rule to protect against the 1% of knuckleheads that's going to make 99% of your team members like, this is their company, not my company. I didn't make up that stupid rule. And of course, let's not even forget, like, most rules people can get around if they really want to, or they follow it and it goes awry. You know, it's we had a typo on the pricing page of a proposal. So now no proposals can go out unless the CFO personally reviews it first. And then you miss deadlines on sales because the CFO was out sick. It's like, well, we can't submit. Don's out sick today. Right. You know, like, people go crazy on them. So I just say, like, every rule, great leaders have no rules. They replace the rules with values, with guardrails, and conversation as much as possible.
Yeah, I can see that. It goes back to like I think a key tenet of when you're giving people things that you want them to do, you know, giving orders or direction or whatever it is, whether it's to employees or even kids, that if you can explain the why, the purpose behind it, and they know why you're telling them to do things. I mean, I know for me, when someone tells me to do something, and I mean, which doesn't happen much anymore now that I'm working on my own, thank goodness. But if someone tells me to do something and I don't know why, I might spend the whole time being like, why am I doing this? I don't really want to do this. Or, you know, if it's something I don't agree with, you know, I might begrudgingly buy my own Post-it notes and not submit the receipt. But like, to your point, if I had that whole story and I knew where the company was coming from, you know, why that was put into place, you know, why the profit was so important and where that was going, you know, I might pay a lot more attention to that. And I do think that, you know, to the $3 beer versus $5 milkshake, having been a traveling consultant for the last 8 years, I've seen, you know, the clients that nitpick that stuff and the ones that don't, and how they don't appreciate where I might, you know, let's be honest, I like to spend money on a nice dinner, but I'll cut back in other areas to make up for that. And no one will point out, you know, notice that, like, oh, thank you for saving money here. They just want to catch you for breaking the rules and spending too much money in another place.
Yeah, you said a lot of great stuff like that. Like, I think this is a great way to think about it, is that why. And I try to, I'm not perfect at it, but like, even if I'm asking my assistant to like go make copies and collate this thing, and it's going to be this mindless 2 hours at the copy machine, I will explain, like, hey, listen, we've got a board meeting and this is the board deck and they're really important. And I tried to get them earlier, but I couldn't because we were waiting for this. So I apologize about that. And now in the next 2 hours, we have to do this. Like, she's not going to like the task. She'd rather not do that task, but at least she understands where it's coming from and why, and it's important. And it's funny. So right now, LEADx being a startup, there's only 10 of us, but at one point I had about 350, you know, employees in the downline. And I never had many rules, no dress code rules, no vacation policy rules, no travel expense report caps. And the couple of times I tried, it would be like, now this is going back, so maybe the dollars are too low in this example, but if I don't have, like today I tell someone Gary was traveling out to California for a conference and he's like, what do I do for like dinners? What's the limit or whatever? I'm like, Gary, there's no limit. Like just be, we're startups, money's, be reasonable. Do it what you want. And I don't even know what he spent, but I'm sure it was reasonable. When I had back in the day said like, okay, we're growing, we need a limit. It's like $35 a day, for food and beverage when you travel or whatever it was. You know what every expense report came back at? Like $34.82 because it was like, well, I'm stuffed full, but I'm going to have dessert because I got $5 more on my expense tab today.
You got a budget to fill.
I got budget to fill. I think people go up to the budget. It doesn't keep them down. I think they go up.
It's just like when you schedule meetings for an hour when you only have a little bit of time, things to do, right? People will expand.
Exactly.
That's cool. So tell me, I think we got a little bit of in this, but speaking of why did you write this book and what do you want people to get out of it?
Yeah. So, I believe leadership is a superpower. And I think most of what people think about traditional management leadership is wrong. And so when I talk about leadership, to me, I've talked to John Maxwell, I've talked to Kim Blanchard. Everyone, when I say what's leadership in a word, they say influence. It's just influence. And when you realize leadership is influence, well, it starts with self-leadership. Again, like, am I able to lead myself, influence myself out of bed at 6 a.m. and onto the treadmill, or not? Am I able to lead my family members around me? I'm either influencing in one direction or another. Part of something in the book that I get some hate on is I reference a study. There's 3 studies done on families that eat dinner together 4 or more nights a week. And it is crystal clear. The families that eat together 4 or more nights a week, their teenagers get better grades, are more likely to graduate high school, delay, have less drug use, delay their first sexual encounters. Like as a parent, all the good stuff is up, all the bad stuff is down.
I've heard this research as well. Yeah.
Yeah. And they control, like I was like, well, that's probably just the demographic factors. Yeah, I'm pretty sure like UCLA, scientists know how to control for all these factors.
Right.
And so here's the thing I say, leadership is influence. You're either making it home for dinner or you're not. And I'm not saying I'm perfect. I'm just saying you're there or you're not there. And you're leading your kids towards a certain set of behaviors or towards behaviors you don't want. It's same with date night. You can either have date night once a week with your spouse or not. One leads towards better marital quality and intimacy. One leads away from marital quality and intimacy. At work, it's as simple, like this isn't hard stuff. Like we're pre-show talking about some of the executive coaching stuff too. Mm-hmm. And like what the coaches tell me often when they do 360s on like the big bosses, what comes back, it's like, every Monday he comes in and has never asked me how my weekend was, or I pass him in the hallway and he doesn't even make eye contact, or I've been working for him for 10 years. He doesn't know the name of my children. And it's like, I used to be that bad boss. And it wasn't that I wasn't like I was being rude. I was such a type A driver guy that I'd be racing down the hall, going from one meeting to the next, thinking in my mind about what I had to do. And I'd walk by you and I wouldn't see you. I wouldn't notice you. But like when I now realize that this simple behavior of when you walk down the hallways in your office, do you make eye contact? Do you smile? Do you say good morning? Do you ask someone how their weekend was? Do you take the time to learn what their kids or spouse's name, is and ask about them? Yeah. It's a dramatic improvement in engagement and what people want. So when you walk down the hallway, it's not like you're choosing to lead. You are leading, you're influencing whether you want to or not. You're either influencing higher engagement and satisfaction or you're influencing lower engagement and satisfaction simply by doing these simple behaviors. And so, you got me on going now in the book. That's like one aspect. Yeah. So like leadership is a superpower in all areas of your life. And yet when I grew up, now I'm 51. So when I grew up, I was told things like, got to have an open door policy. But also like leaders wear masks, like don't show weakness, all this kind of stuff. there, reveal, like I say now, reveal everything. And I used to hear like, never give bad news. You don't want people, worrying. You don't want them stressed. You don't want them updating their resumes.
Yeah.
All this is BS. Like maybe it worked back in the day. These days in our modern workforce and 24/7, and it's about teamwork and information collaboration. There's a chapter called Reveal Everything, Even Salaries, because you know what? The 20-something-year-olds are all telling each other salaries anyway. Anybody can go on the internet and go on PayScale and put in their job title and city and have a pretty good idea of what the going rate is.
Yeah.
And if you aren't willing to talk openly about salaries, it's because probably there's some bias in there. And the classic one is like, I think this is changing, but you ask the candidate, well, they say, well, what's the job pay? And you say, well, what are you making now?
Right.
And if Kevin says, I make $100,000 and the budget for the job was 125, lo and behold, my offer is going to be 105 or 110. Like, a 5 or 10% bump is good enough to get them, and it will. But now, especially if you're a woman, for example, and you started off being paid less than a man, that perpetuates year after year after year. So the Silicon Valley companies, not all of them, but there's companies like Basecamp and Buffer. They're neither of which are in Silicon Valley, so I shouldn't have said that. They're transparent. They say, look, this is what we do. And they even have a different formula, but it's like, we're at the 90th percentile of what your job appears on PayScale. And then we'll adjust it based on what part of the world you live in, a little up or a little down. Mm-hmm. And we'll give you a bump on if you've got 5 years experience instead of 2 or whatever. But it's all transparent. So if you and I are both like level 2 engineer, would we make exactly the same to the dollar? Maybe not, but we would pretty much know what we're being paid. Yeah. And if it ever got released, publicly, we'd have no surprise. It'd be like, well, yeah, of course Andy makes $5,000 more than me because I know he got that kicker, or he chose the stock options instead of, the cash or whatever it is, So
yeah, it's just a little bit more networking to get.
Yeah, it's like we got to have no rules. We got to be more transparent. We've got to just challenge the conventional wisdom on so many of these things.
I love it. The rant. So there's definitely a lot of good things to come out of this book, and I like the research on dinner. I'm I travel a lot, but I'm proud to say when I'm home, we do have family together, dinner together as a family every night with no TV, no devices. And it's not like TV perfect. There's kids running around throwing things, but
TV perfect.
At least it's a good time to connect. And that's a great metaphor or, example, much like in the corporate world, you need to have regular conversations with your team, with your employees, with your boss. And if you're not having those, you don't know what's going on. And if people feel like they're not being heard or seen, or they feel like they're left out, or they're being paid less, or they're not appreciated, whatever it is, or especially if they don't feel like they know where their career is going, or they don't have opportunities, they're going to be looking at other jobs. They just are. And so if you're not doing that, break the rules and have more of those conversations. One more thing I wanted to get into, Kevin, is I think in this day and age, technology is making it easier for us to connect and get on a video call like this, all the stuff that's out there, AI. And yet I think people value personal connection more than ever. And you and I are both organizing our conferences in a similar space. So tell me about yours, because I think you have one coming up, right?
Well, you're far more planned than I am. So, last year I did, it was called the Scaling Leadership Conference out of Philadelphia. And it was a kind of a small invite only thing for heads of leadership development, talent management. And we're looking to do one at the end of this year, but it's likely going to be tied into some of the book content as well. So it's not just leadership development professionals, but for those who might, have that interest or role in any size company, including, small to mid-size.
Got it. Very cool. Yeah, I saw that on your email list. I know you did one before, and of course, we're organizing one for talent development, the Talent Development Think Tank, coming up in November. I just think it's so valuable to be able to bring people together to learn. Just a couple more questions for you. One is, I know you're working on this AI powered coach. Are there any other big trends that you're following in leadership development that are impacting the way people lead or support leadership?
Well, I mean, what I see in leadership development, especially in that area of employee engagement, is of course now 10 years ago when I was kind of, in the leading company in that space, it was employee engagement. Of course, now it's like one circle out where it's employee experience. So engagement is a subset of it, but now people are looking at everything from, how was the onboarding, the interview and onboarding process, right on to the exit interview and everything in between. And I think that's a healthy move. But to be honest, I'm disappointed in how little research there is. Like when it comes to engagement, there's a lot of reasons. Like there's a few different definitions or whatever, but everybody kind of is measuring the same thing. And whether you look at like the top 3, 5, 6 consulting companies, one will say, oh, that driver is called growth. Someone else is going to call it career challenge and development. Like they call them different things, but they're all kind of measuring the same things. And I think this employee experience space, I hear different definitions. I don't see consistent models of what people are measuring. I'm not seeing a lot of correlation studies. So I hope it gets there, but like that's a trend that I'm seeing. Yeah. And along with that is clearly everything's getting technology driven. And I hope it doesn't crowd out all the human component. But, even just putting our business hats on, if you look at the like sky high valuations that small tech HR companies are having and companies that are selling themselves that, they've got $10 million in revenue and they sell themselves for over $100 million. It's because this move towards tech, mobile learning, AI, I think people really are seeing that the future workforce, we want an experience that's digital, and we want it to be as seamless or even fun as our consumer apps, whether that's Instagram or something else. So the companies, the big trend is this race to technology. How can we use AI for talent development, for leadership development, for HR? How can we use, predictive analytics and things to make us a little bit smarter at this? That's certainly the trends for better or for worse.
Yeah, it makes sense. And a lot of that, I'm seeing a lot of that as well. Kevin, what's a book recommendation, a book that either had a big impact on you or that you often recommend that you yourself have not written?
I won't even ask how many of your former interview hosts try to recommend their own books.
No, nobody has recommended their own books. I haven't had hardly any authors as prolific as you. So,
I'm a big reader. Like I read at least a book a week, if not more. And I think, so there's so many great ones, but one that doesn't get mentioned a whole lot in the space, a little bit, but it's Brene Brown's Daring Greatly. And, at risk of oversharing, I think I probably read that book when I was 40 and it wasn't like I was a young kid and I thought I was fairly self-actualized and understood myself. Yeah. But that book, Daring Greatly, really crystallized for me my own developmental areas in terms of the need for external validation. And of course, as a leader, that's really bad. You can't need to be popular or liked, as an example. And why I would maybe choose certain goals over other goals. It was just a really cool, eye-opening, easy read kind of book. And so, that one, Daring Greatly, is one that in the last 5-10 years, I've recommended a lot.
That's awesome. Brene Brown, obviously very popular. She's changed a lot of people's lives. I have one more question before I do. For people interested in finding out more about what you're doing with LEADx or getting the new book, where's the best place for people to go?
Yeah, the book's available everywhere, bookstores, online, of course. You can check out, there's a free action plan with the book at norulesleadership.com. And if anybody's interested in this, AI-powered Coach Amanda, the website's leadx.org, LEADx.org. And there's a free trial. Anybody can just download, sign up for the free trial, download the app, and just play around with it.
Got it. Okay. Last question for anybody in talent development, trying to help their leaders become better leaders, improve employee engagement, whatever it is. What's one more piece of advice that you would give those talent development professionals?
Yeah, they probably don't need advice from me, but it's that if you really are trying to move the needle on engagement, on your culture, realize it's the manager, 70%, it's the manager. And by doing the survey and giving them their data, I mean, that's the minimum you need to be doing. But those action plans aren't working very well. They set the action plan and then they're forgetting to do any of those actions. And certainly if you're only surveying once a year, it's forgotten. So my recommendation, however you do it, it's like, yes, measure who's doing a good job of engagement, who isn't, but then train, develop, coach those managers in these core driving areas. And again, whether it's a human coach or a robot coach, these surveys will tell you, Kevin, you need to get better at recognition, or Kevin, you need to do better at communication. Kevin, you need to do better at talking about mission, vision, values. It will tell you what you need to get better at. And by setting a specific goal and creating an action plan in that area, that's not like just go off and do it, but like there's accountability. What did you do this week to get better in that area? Send a note into HR, have an accountability buddy, give people mentors, give people coaches, but it needs to become a process. The current action plan system is not working.
All right. Love it. And to get more information and do that free trial again, it's leadx.org. And the new book is called No Rules Leadership. Kevin Kruse, thank you so much for coming on the Talent Development Hot Seat to share all of your wisdom and experience. I really do appreciate it. And I know our listeners do as well. So thank you again for coming on.
Thanks for the opportunity.
All right. Take care.